We're not trying to rewire ourselves. We're just falling into the trap, right? That becomes a big threat to not only our self-esteem, but what we can achieve out in the world, what we believe is possible for us.
Every emotion under the sun were on social media, but I know for me, the biggest threat is like when I am in a negative state and then I go on there, oh my God, it'll catastrophize my entire week. Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where people like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. That is always a mouthful to say. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I'm your host, Emilia Smith. Welcome back to another episode 116, the biggest threat to how we see ourselves. So if this episode pulled you in like a cowboy trying to wrestle in a cow, this really means that you're in the right place, because you know that there is in fact a big old threat out there. You probably are aware of what that is and what we're going to be talking about in this episode. And you probably need a little bit of that validation, but want to hear a little bit of a unique perspective. So we hope to be able to share in this episode what Bianca and I believe one of the biggest threats right now as we are speaking and recording this in August of 2022, in terms of why is this such a threat of how we see ourselves. And this month, like we've been talking about in the last couple of episodes, we've been really digging into body image, self-esteem, a lot of those things in terms of that reflection of how we view ourselves, which is so important for what we do in the world, because turns out the levels of self-confidence and self-esteem and the higher you view yourself directly correlates to how more risk prone you are, or willing to take a risk, or to take that leap of faith, whether it be to, go to the gym for the first time or try to achieve a goal that you've never set out to do. And so this threat, when it comes down to self-image, how that directly correlates with the rest of your life, we're going to bring in a perspective that hopefully helps it come down to where you're at currently. So, Bianca, you want me to start this one off?
Yeah, go for it.
Alrighty. So Bianca and I were just doing a little bit of debrief of the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely pause this, go to that, and then come back here. But to continue the conversation, we were talking about social media, and we were kind of really looking at it in terms of how can we make this podcast a little bit different than the last one. And my perspective on this was really that, like, we are in a very dangerous time right now in terms of our hyperconnectivity, and how, if you listen to the last episode, how we're really allowing essentially the rest of the world to dictate that gap in our perception. So what I mean by that is when we jump onto a social media scroll or feed or whatnot, we don't necessarily know what that might be doing to our brain. And while we might have heard about it and how it's damaging the youth and all that jazz, and we're not going to sit here and just completely slay social media, because it's helped so many people in the world. We've been able to connect with so many people around the world and help them as a result of social media. But like all things, social media, social platforms, whenever we're engaging in social activities, that can be a wonderful bloodbath with respects to your self-image and how you see yourself. And so I said in the last episode that there's this gap in our perception where we sometimes forget. It's so easy to swipe in with our thumbs into a social media feed without checking your belief. And Bianca had mentioned a blueprint system. Check your belief in what your societal expectation was. In this context, we were talking about body image, checking that before you actually go to consume. So even before this podcast, did you check the belief of, well, my idea of the biggest threat to how I see myself is this? Did you fill in that gap yourself? Did you give yourself credit of all the great things that you've done to see yourself in a positive light? Likely, and the answer that we'll get to this question over and over again is no. Why? Because we've never been taught how to do that. And so through this episode, we want to use social media in particular for how we can go about improving upon this, and why it is a threat from this angle that we're specifically talking about. And before we get in, again, I will preface this by saying we are avid on social media. Social media is absolutely essential for our impact in the world. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunities that it has opened up for us and for the amazing community that is Evolve Ventures, right? And so I want to start there. The threat though of what this tool, and I say tool because you can, if you are the master of it and not the slave, it becomes a tool. Otherwise, you are actually the tool of it. You are the slave to social media, right? And so this tool has allowed all of these incredible things to happen for us, but the majority of people don't check themselves at the door, if you will, before you swipe from app to app. Before, you don't check your thumb and let that be the indicator of like, okay, let me bring this all the way up to my brain and say, hey, what is that gap? What is that gap for me that I need to give myself before I consume this content? Do I need to remind myself that this person that I might see on my social media feed will have a completely different cultural background of how they should look and how what fashion is to them and what body image means to them? And do I check myself in the fact that, do I make a promise to myself that I am good enough where I am? And so when I see someone that might look similar to me or might have the same gender as me or might have some similar qualities, do I give myself that permission to say, I love myself where I am? Or do you just unconsciously start scrolling and you start having this environment of social media feed negatively impact and start to corrupt your mind? And I remember, it's funny because no matter the times, there's going to be an arena. There's going to be a bloodbath, and it will take a different form in the future for sure. And I'm calling that now. We all know this, right? If it wasn't the newspaper, it was the radio. If it wasn't the radio, it was social media platforms. If it wasn't social media platforms, it was gaming. If it wasn't gaming, it's something else, right? And so I remember my grandmother at one time, shout out to Nana, she used to say every single time, don't watch TV. It's an idiot tube. She used to call it like the idiot box. And like now I can laugh at it because, again, if you use the TV just like any other medium of information, if you use it, meaning you are in control of when you turn it on, when you turn it off. You can check your beliefs at the door. You understand how you are being entertained, what it's doing to your mind. Okay, it's not an idiot box. But if you're someone who just turns it on because you want to be distracted, because you want to be entertained, and you let whatever comes on be consuming your mind, consuming your emotions, and you slip into this state of just being a consumer, that is when you slip into what she called the idiot box. It becomes an idiot box. Why? Because you're not getting any sort of smarter. You're not really coming out after you eventually turn that off 6 hours later on the other end of this. And what we happen to do, whether it's TV, like I said, whether it be podcasts or whether it be, social media feeds, we slip into this unconscious state. And so the biggest threat to how we see ourselves, I really do believe, is our unconsciousness when we consume. And we're using social media in this regard, because what I said to Bianca before this episode is that we're gamifying self-image. We're gamifying how we view ourselves. And what I mean by that's why there's this whole controversy around why should we have likes? Why should we have metrics around social media feeds? I remember there was a whole thing last year where Facebook and Instagram kind of pondered the idea, because of the negative implications, we should pull, and Twitter, I think, did something similar. We should pull other people being able to see likes on someone else's photo. And I remember so many content creators, so many influencers freaked out, and there was a huge uproar on consumers of social media, because what would that mean to their image, the image that they're projecting to the world, right? What would that mean in terms of the value that we as consumers, or we as slaves in this essence, what would that mean to us? So there's a recent study actually that came out in 2020. I believe it was conducted of 1,500 youths in the UK, actually, that asked the youth what was the best social media. They asked a series of questions, and they started to gauge and rate how much this impacted the youth image of themselves.
Wait, what were they measuring? I'm sorry, I missed it.
They were measuring self-esteem. Self-esteem. So when you go and you consume on whether it be YouTube, Instagram, I don't think TikTok was included in that, but different social media platforms. When you go and use it, how do you feel afterwards? So they're gauging the self-esteem, right? Okay. And so after consumption, turns out that a large majority of those surveyed and of those interviewed and of those focus groups, turns out that Instagram actually was the worst platform for people's self-esteem. After they got off of it, the youth, I think it was, I want to say it was 17 to 24 years old. It has been determined as a result, and you can look at research articles on this online too, but it has been told through these datas that this is the worst platform for people's self-esteem. Why? Because there's so many things in terms of FOMO, like, right? Fear of missing out. So many things that have been birthed out of these social media things. So for example, if you have a friend that's not answering your text messages, but yet he posts online, or yet he posts when he's with his friends, he can't hang out with you, but all of a sudden you see a post come through. What does that immediately do? What is the meaning that you immediately start to associate to it? Oh, they don't love me.
Jackass.
Yeah. All these things start to come through your head, right? And then when you're scrolling on your feed and you're seeing people in like on the vacations and doing X, Y, Z, what you're not currently doing, okay, comparing yourself to that person in their feed, you start to think negative thoughts. Well, you don't necessarily know that there might be an executive admin posting that to help engage with their followers and help engage content. But yet we immediately take face value and we look at that and we say, wait a second, I'm not doing that, right? I don't have that body. My identity, I don't have all this stuff. And so a lot of, there's been spikes in anxiety, depression, even bullying as a result of a lot of these social media feeds. And while we know this, what are we doing in particular is my question to a lot of our listeners. What are you in particular doing to combat this threat? Because I truly believe if you're not a part of the solution, then you're contributing to the problem. And while I know that might be hardcore to say, what does that actually look like? So like, for example, Bianca, you and I have both talked about how we don't use filters on our photos to enhance an image. We literally won't do it. Though I respect the creative side of things, if we were to put on a filter, and I know it can be fun, so again, I'm not knocking it. What I am knocking is the unconsciousness of what this is doing to our brains, right? If our levels of self-esteem are dropping as a result of consuming content, and we know that, what are we doing about it? Are we trying to break that habit? I have a client right now who she told me, she's like, I'm not even touching my phone in the morning, that used to be her go-to crutch. There's a direct correlation right now that I can see with her self-image and her positivity and her feeling good about herself. Direct correlation with how much of a reduction she has to consuming content on social media. So what we're forgetting, and this is why I believe it's the biggest threat, and then B, I'm going to pass it over to you. We are forgetting and we are blurring the lines of what is virtual reality and what is actual reality. And the more we start to blur those lines and forget that there is a creativity in all of this, and there is a gamification of this every single day, and there's giant tech companies that are making massive monies on your consumption because we're not checking ourselves at the door. We're not trying to rewire ourselves. We're just falling into the trap, right? That becomes a big threat to not only our self-esteem, but what we can achieve out in the world, what we believe is possible for us. And so how we see ourselves, we're giving that away to other people that don't even know us. We're giving that away to our followers. We're giving that away to our feeds who we're following. One of the biggest things that we did on our team is like get rid of the people that do not bring joy to your feed. Because it's the messages that you surround yourself with that give you the opportunity to interpret what that means about yourself. And if you're not in a good state of mind and you go scrolling, lo and behold, you'll be in the hole, you know. So B, over to you. Tell me all the things. Biggest threat to how we see ourselves. What's your perspective?
I just want to see if I understood this. So your takeaway was not checking the frame of mind that you're entering into when you're entering into social media. Like that was the simple way of explaining it. Did I get that right?
I appreciate you asking for clarification. So the biggest threat to how we see ourselves is the fact that we're gamifying that now. And like we were in any platform, whether it be the TV or the radio or whatnot, we're gamifying that. And so now what's changed from just like kind of a one-way street is now we're hyper connected. And we're seeing other social media feeds, and we're forgetting that there's a difference between virtual reality and reality. And as a result of that, we're not changing anything. We're actually consuming more of that. There's less and less people rewiring the experience that they have, when even though they know that social media might not be good for them, especially not when they're in negative state. But there's a lack of change of you know, stopping to blur those lines. Lack of ownership, I even think, you know.
So in our intro, we literally say like in a hyper-connected global economy, right? That's exactly where we're at right now.
For sure.
So what are people supposed to do? Like what? So someone listening to this right now, it's like, okay, like this sounds kind of scary. Like this is kind of daunting. Like, yes, I get it. Like social media, it is this whole thing. But I mean, even with COVID happening and whatnot, for the majority of us, the only way we did connect with other people is through social media. The only way that, I mean, you and I, like, we don't leave our houses. So like that's
on purpose, for sure.
That's one of like the biggest ways that we do connect with other people. So what are our listeners supposed to do? How are they supposed to combat that and approach this from a healthy way so that this gamification is not hurting them in the way that it probably is? Because I know it's hurt me.
Yeah.
Like the majority of us, when we're happy, we go on social media. When we're sad, we go on social media. When we're bored, we go on social media. When we're feeling every emotion under the sun, we're on social media. But I know for me, the biggest threat is like when I am in a negative state and then I go on there, oh my God, it'll catastrophize my entire week, because it's like I'm feeling bad and now I'm like hammering it in with all of these pictures that are, again, photoshopped, edited, certain lighting, certain angles. It's the highlight reel. It's the one good picture that they got.
The one vacation that they went on.
Right. And I let this, and in the past, I don't do this as much anymore. Thankfully, I've put like a really strong boundary around this, but it used to completely ruin my week because I'm already in a bad state. Then I go see that and then it solidifies it. So for people who are kind of in that space, what do they do?
So I'm all for cutting cold turkey, like disconnect, but like at the same time, like I know far more.
What's the realistic version?
The realistic version of that starts really small. Like for example, like one of the coaching calls that I was on was like, and we said this, remove from your environment what does not bring you joy. So when you know that there's a profile that you see every single time on your feed that gives you that kind of like hit of like, oh, it kind of feels like a gut punch, but like you still kind of want to keep up with them because like there's this weird part of you that's like kind of jealous, but you want to see like what did it. Click that follow button to unfollow or unfollow them. Click that unfollow button and like do it in your feed. Literally, if you see a photo every time you go in there and you see a photo or you see an image or you see a message come through, click happy. What does that actually mean? You will be happy once you unfollow the people that are not making you you happy. So that's a very small example. What I've also done with clients is like, okay, let's go into your feed's one environment, but then you have all of these like sneaky people that will sneak in. These are all the people that you follow and the hashtags that you follow. Every single person that's listening to this right now, I want you to go into whatever social media platforms you have. You probably have a ton of people or a ton of hashtags or peoples or feeds or whatever that you follow. It's even like email. Like you might subscribe to specific things that are not actually bringing you joy and not actually bringing you value. And so I want you to go in there, go to it. Say, for example, it's your social media feed. Hit unfollow. Just boom, 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 boom. If it's a question mark, unfollow. Literally have no mercy. If it's a hashtag that does not serve you anymore, unfollow. And that's the thing. Like we feel as though like, okay, maybe we met this one person at the bar and okay, like, well, I kind of like am interested in their life. Like unless they genuinely are bringing you joy, unfollow them, detach. We have this thing where we start to collect all of these people that we want to follow. We have these hashtags. One of the worst things that I've seen in companies even is the cleanup activities of a past chapter. We have chapters of our lives. People come into it. We need to also get better at removing people from our lives. That means the social media feeds. That means the subscription to newsletters. That means things that are not serving you. And so that's one small example. A whole nother thing that I'm an advocate for is reduction of time. There are screen settings that you can put limitations on your devices. Literally, these are free things that come with the devices. You can limit your timers as to what can contribute. Like say, for example, you're scrolling through a social media feed. You can literally set a timer of what is allowed and lock yourself out. Because say, for example, you don't trust yourself, that if that timer goes off, you're going to get off it. There are little things that can go such a long way. And if it even comes down to it where you want to remove it from your environment, like I had a client once who was like, you know, I don't know, like I don't trust myself that if my phone's in my room, I'm not going to pick it up when I'm bored, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, when I'm just trying to hang out with me. Okay, remove it from that room. Remove or regulate yourself. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but those are some things that I found to be really helpful for past clients. Small little things can add up if you prove to yourself again and again. And then once you start to reduce that, the things that don't bring you joy, then that's where we start to shift and say, okay, cool. Now you've had a little bit of a win here. Awesome. Now let's actually check your belief system at the door before you go into the feed next. Because it's just like, honestly, it's just like any sort of addict. These are literally from a tech perspective. And I have a tech background, so I actually appreciate how incredible the design is, but I know the harm that can come for someone's unconscious. That's why I'm advocating for being mindful and being conscious of how you consume and what you consume and when you consume and how you consume. The unconsciousness is running rampant, and I really know that if we don't check this while our awareness is raised, we will be run and we will be a slave of our tools, even more than we are right now.
In both of those pieces of advice that you gave, they sound very avoidance driven, which is not bad, but I do want to just highlight, you can't always avoid. True. A lot of people don't want to set the limits on their phone. They don't want to have to do that, and that's fine. Not everybody has to. It would help, but you don't necessarily have to. So I think the one feedback that I would give is, it's just like when you're trying to clean up your diet, for example, right? It's not that you can never eat sweets again, but it's portion control. And what meaning do those sweets have? What is the hold that they have on you? So, for example, if you say, I can never eat Oreos again. Me and Emilia were just joking around about how, like, I personally don't keep Oreos in the house because I have no self-control. But that's not actually a solution, because what happens when they are around? So I've had to work on my relationship with it. Well, it's an Oreo. Yeah, it tastes good. But what is the thing I'm trying to get from eating this? Oh, comfort. Okay, Oreo tastes good. Tastes good equals happy. So for a lot of you out there, if you don't want to avoid it, if you don't want to stop using it, if you don't want to limit the consumption, well, then just start to be conscious of when you are in there of what are the thoughts that are coming up when I'm scrolling? When I see this person's feed, when I see this person's body, when I see all of these things, well, what's coming up for me? Like to what Emilia said, what is the meaning that I'm giving this about me and my life, and what does it mean? And start to try to process through those. Because in all honesty, that is what's causing the challenge. It's not that Instagram is bad, it's your relationship to it that's causing harm. And if we can start to work on that, and if we can start to work on why is seeing that person's body make me feel so bad about myself, then we can start to remove the chain of control that we give to these platforms.
So well articulated. And the reason why I tend to go to the avoidance thing is because what I've found is that people really don't want to evaluate their relationship with these things. There's a lot of avoidance to evaluating that. And
it's hard.
And yeah, it's really, really hard. But I 1000% agree with you. That's if we were to do a real root cause analysis and not start small and build. Would just go straight there, which by the way, if you're someone out there that wants to do that, like holler at your girl, because I'm all for that. But like in all reality, I know a lot of people, you know, the unconsciousness, it's like unlayering, and it's like, you know, it's like being caught in a spider web, and I know what that feels like. And man,
listen, the critters we do avoid here, all right? We don't talk about critters. Those we avoid. Don't talk about critters.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating topic, and you know, so many people are polarized on this, but you know, coming back to the relationship that you do have with it, it's fascinating because these engineers have done such an incredible job at actually having your phone, you know, even like, for example, there's so many research studies out there that like people feel more comfortable and confident going out or like going for a run or going for a walk if they have their phone with them. So your like best friend is now your phone because it provides this sense of certainty and security and safety and all that stuff because it has such incredible capabilities associated with it. But we let those really great things kind of slip under the radar of what is actually threatening how we see ourselves. And, you know, even just to that point, do you see yourself as someone that on a walk you could protect yourself if anything were to happen? You know, have we lost more of that because of our reliance, or are we just giving that away? So what would be your episode suggestions for anyone that liked this episode and appreciated it? And what's your final takeaway?
This might not seem like it relates, but number 25, toxic relationships, identifying them and how they feel. Most of us, the biggest threat to how we see ourselves is the toxic relationships with our phone, with the other people around us, with the gamification of social media. You know, it is really toxic. So final takeaway really is to check to see the relationship that you have with all of these things and the impact that they are making on you.
Well said. We're really holding you accountable in these episodes, huh, people? Oh man. Okay. I will let that loving hardcore nature fly a little bit. 87. Are you a doer or a pretender? There's a lot of people that want to get into personal development, and I really am so grateful for that. But in order to develop, one must grow. And to be honest, one can't really grow without some pain and without some hardcore mirrors and reflection. So I encourage you all, trust me, it is so worth it to not be, you know, the slave to your device. It's so freeing and liberating to check yourself at the door, check your belief system, your blueprint, you know, like give yourself the love before you go and consume content when you know it's already set up to kind of make you feel like crap, right? So really encouraging people to take that one small step that one small step that seems to resonate best with you. And if you ever need help with that, please reach out to Bianca or myself, because one small thing that might have helped a client of ours might just help you get it started. And that's what we are all about, to help you start that journey for you.
And it's possible. It's more possible than you think.
1000%. Cool.
Thank you all so much. We hope this was valuable. We hope this was helpful. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.